Before this video begins, I want to warn you that some people may find the photos and videos at the beginning of this video distressing. These images are not here to shock or to objectify for my own ends, more to illustrate how where I live in Japan has changed me and ultimately my artwork. The scenes you will see are from my home city of Miyako here in Iwate Prefecture, and how it was comprehensively devastated during the Higashi nihon daishinsai, or Great East Japan earthquake of 2011. If you feel that the imagery may be upsetting, I'd consider stopping the video now. Thank you. As you can see here in Iwate, in the north of Japan, we've had a reasonable amount of snow. Not as much as some parts of Japan, which have had a heck of a lot more. So, I was recently in Yonezawa in Yamagata Prefecture, and they have had a heck of a lot more snow than what we have here. It's still very pretty, I think you'll agree. So, I'm off to Lawson to photocopy 2 of my recent sketches because I need to reduce the size of them and move them onto manga paper, which I can then colour. Okay, so these drawings actually do bear quite a bit of relevance to me walking along the tsunami wall here, and I've shied away from talking about it too much because I know that obviously there are some extremely terrifying memories that the reason this wall exists in its current form evokes for many people, and certainly from talking to local residents here in Miyako, they certainly prefer not to talk about it, and that's very understandable. So I have shied away from talking about it because I don't want to offend or upset anybody necessarily, but yes, these drawings are all part of this manga which I'm working on, and yes, it will depict some events that will be very difficult for some people to potentially read, but I feel that overall the message that will come out will be it'll be worth depicting it. Maybe I'm just being oversensitive about it, but I'm just trying to make sure that I don't misrepresent things and that it's done for a positive cause in the end. But yes, I guess living where I do has had a big effect on me. I talked about previously how it was another natural disaster that occurred in 1995 in Kobe, down in the west of Japan, that ultimately probably has led me to being here in the first place. But living where I do, quite literally, the effects of what happened here nearly 10 years ago are all around me, and I just don't want to avoid talking about that really, because for me, I have found a way to express something that's in myself, but also somewhat tell the story of what kind of happened here 10 years ago. So I think overall it's well worth persevering with and actually showing you. So anyway, so I've got my copies now from the copy key at Lawson, and so I'm just going to head back now and yeah, get settled into working on doing the inking and obviously the colouring as well. So yeah, I hope that explains a little bit about perhaps some of the context of this. So hopefully from what you've seen already, you can see why the events, what happened here 10 years ago during the Higashi nihon daishinsai, or Great East Japan earthquake, have hugely affected me, where I live and so forth. And when I came to Japan, it was always the intention that I was going to obviously enjoy being an assistant English teacher. That's obviously what's brought me here, and I do enjoy doing that. But longer term, I want to move my career in a direction of actually being able to use my drawing skills and have a more artistically orientated career. Now that's something that may be 5 or so years off in the future. Who's to say what's going to happen in the meantime? But whether I become a professional manga artist or not, it's never going to stop me trying to be an amateur manga artist. And indeed, that is what I have been working towards beginning in the last 10 months or so since I came to Japan. Practicing my drawing skills, working on anatomy, but also working on a story for my first debut manga. Now, it should come as no surprise with obviously the introduction to this video, indeed the video title, that is exactly what I've done. I have fused the experiences that I've had here, what I've learnt about actually living here, with obviously the idea of producing a debut manga. So I want to introduce to you not just some of the artwork that I have been creating for that to actually get that started, but also the manga itself. Now the manga is pretty much almost certain to be called Future Saviours. It's a name that's been stuck with me for at least 6 months now, once some of the basics of the story started to come together during the summer, and I have no intention at the moment to change it. But the idea is that there are going to be 2 main protagonists. There'll be some other characters obviously, but the 2 main protagonists are Saki, and she is a 24-year-old, and we also have Hisao, who is a 37-year-old. Now, just to briefly explain the characters, Saki is a 24-year-old. She lives in rural coastal Iwate, not specifically Miyako, but just the general area of. I've yet to decide exactly how I'm going to represent that, although it will be somewhat based on reality. And she was profoundly affected by events that happened in her childhood. Now, for the sake of the story, I've had to create some fictitious elements, just as any story does, but in a sensitive way. And she was profoundly affected by those. And so in 2011, we basically pick up her story where she's a very creative individual. She loves designing her own clothes and so forth. She's keenly into fashion. She's a bit of a tomboy, but she's got a heart that's as soft as the snow that you might have seen in the video before. And she longs to move away from Iwate. She feels trapped. She wants to move to Tokyo and see how maybe she might be able to further her fashion designs and so forth. She's a very keen skateboarder, which probably plays into a little bit of her tomboyish personality, but she's a very important character in the manga. So she basically has a lot of pressures from her parents, who feel that, you know, whilst they obviously understand that, because obviously they feel the same trauma that she does, that, you know, she's 24 years old, you know, really, she should be married by now. You know, why haven't you found somebody? Why don't you have children yet? And she doesn't necessarily rule that out of her life. In fact, that's probably what she wants eventually. But she's not ready at that stage. For her, her interest is to perhaps escape her past and find herself in a place where she can further perhaps her skating, but also, more importantly, her fashion design and so forth. And then we have Hisao. Now Hisao, as I say, is a 37-year-old. He's a shy, somewhat repressed individual. He works for the Tokyo police force. He's a workaholic. He doesn't have particularly deep relations with his colleagues. He doesn't get too involved with the drinking parties and the other things that go on outside of work. He tends to spend all of his time in the office working away and then going home and not really having much of a life outside of it. And so essentially what happens is that a very unexpected encounter occurs in Hisao's life that begins to change his life dramatically. And so I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to spoil any more about the plot lines, but essentially those are our 2 characters. So what you're going to see today is some clips about some of the processes that I go through with drawing these characters, and then I'm going to show you some of the artwork properly on the video. So it's an extremely exciting concept. one of the things that has held me back perhaps with pushing on with this is this feeling that somehow my Japanese had to be at the level of which I could actually write the manga entirely in Japanese, and that's a long way off. My Japanese has improved immensely since being here, but I can't wait for my skills to be at the level which they will need to be, which could be 2 or 3 years time yet, to be honest with you. So this manga is going to be in English. I'm going to be basically putting it out for free. It'll be serialized chapter by chapter. I'm not going to commit to exactly when the first chapter is going to be out, but I am aiming for a very important date, and I think any of the astute of you will know what I'm aiming towards. But essentially, and I'm only going to very gently mention this because obviously, really, the most important message of this video is actually the importance of the events that happened here 10 years ago and how they've affected it, and how I wish to tell a story that, you know, a lot of people around the world have kind of forgotten, but yet the scars still very much exist. Every day, everywhere you look in my neighbourhood, you'll see those blue signs that you saw in the video before, which showed the water level of when the tsunami hit and so forth. But I'm just going to very gently mention that the reason that I can put it out for free is because there are some people who very generously donate maybe a couple of dollars each month to basically me being able to focus my time on artwork, and I'm going to leave it at that. You will discover how you can support that effort if you're interested, but they definitely make this possible, because without it I would not be sat here in Japan now with the time to be able to hopefully tell an evocative story that is ultimately one that is going to end in a beautiful way with I get emotional. This story means a heck of a lot, not just to me, but I think hopefully, if I can do it well, it will tell a very hopeful story of how we can overcome all sorts of difficulties in our lives, whether they're on an individual basis, whether they're in our personal relationships with other people, but also on a much more wider scale as countries, as nations, and as a world. So it's very ambitious, but I believe I'm old enough and mature enough now to be able to tell it sensitively. So let's crack on with the artwork, because otherwise I'm just going to blather and get more tearful. So thank you for listening. it's actually snowing quite hard. Oh dear. I'm sorry. Sorry, Akiko. 'Tis winter time. Oh, 超寒い。 Okay, well that pretty much wraps up this video. If you've managed to watch to the very end, then well done for you, because it's been quite an emotional journey, I think, this video, for many reasons, and also it's been quite long as well, but I felt that this was a serious topic which has obviously also had many hours, many days of artwork poured into it, well, much longer than that, but the pieces that you've seen have been probably worked over the space of a week or so. So yeah, so these are some of the actual pieces that you may have seen little clips of, the initial working drawings of Saki night there, Yorona Saki, basically when she's woken up with a start. So I will actually put these properly up on screen so you will see them, but this is the actual paper. Another piece is like the other scene which you've seen of Saki sort of laying awake in bed or on her futon, and you can see how that originally started, and I've even started beginning to map out that if I did this as a colour panel, these would be the kind of colours that I'd probably use. So and of course obviously the main image that obviously I spent time showing you in this video was the image of Saki and Hisao and Hisao's car. I'll let the car geeks out there work out what car it is. It is based on a real car, but basically this was the result of inking those pencil test drawings and so forth and put it all together, and I'm going to show you the final results of that in a moment. And also another bonus which you wouldn't have seen in the video was another image of Saki, which really I feel shows her shall we say her demeanour, her interests and so forth, which was worked up from another obviously test drawing. A number of test drawings are made to do these things. It doesn't just happen first go usually. Sometimes it does, but not often. And yeah, so that's another, again, hand-drawn Copic piece which I will show on screen properly. And you can see here, as I mentioned, I do actually, before I colour an image, I generally know what colours I'm going to use, and I use the same paper that I'm actually using for the finished article as well, because different papers react differently. So, and then this, I suppose, is the main piece, wasn't it? This was where I inked up the drawing of Saki and Hisao together with Hisao's car, and obviously coloured it all in by hand. So yes, this is very much a hand-drawn piece. There is no Photoshop that's gone into this. I feel very pleased with this, and you know, and it gives me a great thrill to produce basically physical artwork which hasn't required a computer at any stage in its creation. And then I've basically worked up a poster which you will see on screen, but this is just basically copy paper, but there is something about seeing this on a piece of paper. You get a real sense of the saturation of the colours and that, so a nice poster for basically trading the manga. And of course there is a lot more to be seen as well, so I'm just going to fold this over. But basically, yes, I've got lots of ideas for the first chapter and so forth, so I've already been working up some of the drawings that may feature in that, some of the poses and so forth. And but also the story, as I say, does have a lot of background to it, shall we say. So I've had to consider how Saki looked as a younger child and so forth, and this isn't necessarily perfected. You know, I've made notes about how the knees actually just need to be knocking together, not overlapping. It doesn't really make sense, and also she just looks a little bit older than her intended age there, but that's just a matter of actually making her overall body a bit smaller, I feel. But a lot of work has obviously gone into this, and just very finally to finish up, some of you who obviously watch the channel will notice that Saki does look very similar to the character that was put into the panel that I did all about my biggest regret when I first arrived here in Japan, which was not learning the entirety of the Japanese language for arriving, which, as we all know, is impossible. But you'll notice there are some similarities. Now, this is not the iteration of Saki that is going to appear in the manga. This is just a little bit before. There are some very slight differences, mostly because there was a real transition away from a slightly cartoony, you know, more exaggerated manga style, shall we say, to a more realistic look, of which I have adopted for future saviours, and I have to say I'm immensely enjoying that more realistic look. So these panels will be reworked in some respects because they I was mindful when I was doing these that these were reflecting some of the early points in the Future Saviours manga. So I didn't tell you that at the time. I was kind of working in two directions, shall we say, killing one or two birds with one stone, as they say. So you get a bit of an idea of perhaps some of the things that are going to be appearing. The Sanoiwa will definitely be appearing in the early stages of the manga. I'm rather hopeful that I can just do a few tweaks to this, re-ink, and then reuse it, and then improve upon what I'd already drawn. So you've already seen some of Future Saviours without me even saying so, I suppose, in a way. So that's pretty much it. That's been pretty much, I think I got back from Yamagata Prefecture on Thursday of last week, which should have been New Year's Eve, and I've been pretty much working non-stop since then. And now it's pretty much time for me to wrap this video up. I look forward to sharing Future Saviours with you, and I know that there have been some very difficult things that I discussed at the top of this video, and I hope that they haven't affected you emotionally in a negative way. I hope that even though they may have made you feel rather unsettled and very sad, and sort of maybe there was a little bit of distress at seeing some of those scenes, but I hope that it actually helps rekindle the story of what happened here nearly 10 years ago on the 11th of March 2011. So seems very strange that it's almost 10 years. Anyway, it's been a real pleasure to share this with you, and I'm going to wrap it up there. I guess it all remains for me to say is see you soon. Peace.